session. And welcome to everyone who just joined us. And welcome to our Coaching Matters program. I'm really excited about this one. Uh-oh, do I suddenly have an echo? Ooh. Well, I'm going to get off the line here really quick in a second. Hey, Heather, if you could just click the Stop Broadcasting button at the top left of your screen, and I think that might actually help. Do I sound any better right now? Or do I still have an echo? Do I sound better? No. Okay. All right, we're good. Thank you. Okay, welcome. I am excited about these next 5 weeks. This is kind of new territory as we have all 4 of the authors of our Coaching Matters book with us throughout these 5 weeks. So this is exciting, and I am going to let them get right to it. I'm going to pop back on here at the end of our hour with a couple of announcements, but just want to say how excited we are to have Joellen and Cindy and Heather and Chris here to join us for what should be 5 great weeks of learning around the Coaching Matters book and around coaching programs. So with that being said, I'm going to mute my phone line and take it away.
Well, good afternoon and good morning to everyone. It's Joellen, and I am delighted to kick us off today, although Cindy Harrison and Chris Bryan will be your lead facilitators for this session. It is my pleasure to do the welcome to all of you, and I want you to know we have people from the north and the east and the west and the south across the ocean in Hawaii, as far north as the Cree-First Nations schools in Alberta, and we have several groups of people joining us. We have one of our perhaps most persistent learners in the group, in Carla McAdam, and she can share a little note about that in her comments to you in the learning community about why I might call her the most persistent learner in the group. A number of you are coming back as learners in our e-learning courses. Robert has been in a course with me before, for example, and it's just exciting to have all of you with us. Also in our group, we have teachers and teacher leaders, some who are quite new to their positions as teacher leaders. And again, I think they'll share that information with you in their community introductions. We have coaches, we have university faculty, we have principals and central office faculty. We have people who work in science and special education, for example, and literacy. And so that should give you a very broad sense of who's within our community of learners. And I hope you'll get a chance to learn more about each other as you continue to share information with one another in your introduction. So welcome to this 5 weeks of learning, and I am going to turn this now over to my colleague.
Hello, this is Cindy Harrison, and Chris and I are together today. We had that opportunity, and Heather's with us as well, but not in the physical room with us. I'm going to just overview what we're going to be doing with the program and what it's going to be each week. This week we're really going to focus on the characteristics of effective coaching programs. And the handout that Tom sent is an important piece of that, and we're sorry you didn't get it earlier. But that's going to be a big part of our focus, and it's really an overview of what really needs to be in place. Week 2 is really about relationships, and we perceive there are 2 really important relationships, coach-principal and coach-teacher. And we'll spend some time talking about each of those and what needs to be in place. Week 3 will be focused on evaluating the coaching programs and the individual coaches. We see those as 2 very different things that need to happen. And we will walk you through considerations and things you ought to think about as you're doing that. Week 4 will focus on what professional learning needs to be in place and support for coaches. We think this is very important and is part of making a successful program. And then week 5 is really what's the future. We believe that coaching programs need to change on a regular basis, and the focus needs to grow and shift as our work grows and shifts as well. Some outcomes of the program, just take a look at the slide that's in front of you. But we're going to spend some time with characteristics. We're going to give you lots of examples of structures and tools. And in the book, in the back of each chapter, are some structures and tools, and they explain to you how you get online to get those. But we'll be talking through some of those. Then the working relationship, and a way to look at the effectiveness of the coaching program. And then we're going to talk about the learning, the ongoing learning, and the future of coaching. We wanted to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. So I'm just going to tell you who I am, and then Joelle and Heather will do the same. I'm a senior consultant for Learning Forward. I also am an independent consultant. I spend most of my time working with coaching programs and or individual schools, working with them on moving forward in their practice.
And I'm Joellen Killian, and I am Senior Advisor to Learning Forward. And in my many, many years of experience in professional learning, I've had the pleasure of doing a wide variety of things, and perhaps my most important work, I feel, is helping educators become empowered supporters of other educators, whether that's in the role of coaching, whether it's in the role of facilitating or supporting. That coaching is near and dear to my heart as one of the most significant strategies that influences educator and student success. Heather, you want to jump on next?
I don't know.
And Heather, you might be on mute, so let me just star, is it star 6 or pound 6? Pound 6 to unmute, Heather. Well, while we're waiting.
Yeah, Chris, yeah, I'll go ahead. Oh, there's Heather. She's typing in the chat box.
That's right. I forgot she was in a place where she wasn't going to be on the phone today.
Okay, all right. All right, and I'm Chris Bryan, and I also am a senior consultant with the Center for Results, which is part of Learning Forward. I also spend most of my time working with coaches in some capacity, supporting them and working with pre-service teachers. I have been a coach. I've been a coach of coaches, and I also have a background working with students with special needs and teachers who work with those students. So welcome, everybody. Okay, so this is our weekly format. We'll kind of have a structure that will follow each session. And so during each session, we're going to take some time to share information around some key ideas or key topics, and you'll have some opportunities to share where you are in your process of thinking about your coaching program in terms of what's going well, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the things that you're thinking about putting in place. We really encourage you to participate, and you'll have lots of opportunities to do that, as many of you are already doing in the text chat, and sometimes we'll have opportunities to do that over the phone as well. Cindy mentioned that we have some tools and structures for you to look at. So if you look through the chapter tools as you read each of the chapters in the book, I know some of you haven't gotten a chance to look at the book or haven't received the book yet, but these chapter tools are at you can access them at the website that you see on your screen, and also at the end of each chapter there is a list of the tools that map the chapter, and there is a website there that you can access to go online and download the tools. And then we ask that you continue to extend and deepen your learning each week between sessions. We have the discussion forum that we really encourage you to use. To post your questions, to post your thinking about, what's, occurring for you between sessions, and we'll address those at the beginning of each session. We also will, at the end of this session and each week, we will post a couple prompts for you, one that will help you reflect on the learning for the day, and one that will prepare you for the topic that's coming up the next week. Okay, by the end of this week, and you see we said by the end of the week because we really want you to continue your learning beyond our session today. So we want you to spend today and then throughout the week to continue to examine the characteristics of effective coaching programs, and also to think about what you're considering makes sense for you to apply to your own coaching program. So we want to start out with a poll because we believe that part of what we want to look at here is where each of our participants are. So we want to know how many of you have actually had community members or other educators challenge the value of coaching in your school. You know, sometimes this is happening with all of the money challenges each of us has, as well as other challenges. So we'd like you to just kind of weigh in here. And we see 35 of you are connected, so we'll wait just maybe another 10 seconds or so. Okay, now this is an interesting overall reaction to the poll. I would have expected more of you to have had people that have challenged the value of coaching so far. But it's nice to see some of you haven't had that. But one of the things that we see is that in Chapter 1, we think you had some chances to actually look at how might you address some of the challenges you've had. So the next kind of conversation we want to have with you, and we'd love you to write your answers to this in the chat box. For those of you who have your book, how did Chapter 1 help you respond to the challenges to your program? So I'm going to wait about 30 seconds to get some responses, and then we'll talk about those. Thank you, Robert. I think Lynn and Sheila are both mentioning the studies and how that could help you with different groups of people. Oh, and so Robert had an interesting thinking there about other ways to test assumptions and experiences. For those of you who haven't had a chance to read Chapter 1 yet, we've been using Chapter 1 a lot as we work with school boards or school districts as they either consider having a coaching program or as they think about whether they should keep their current coaching program or change it. So I think it's a pretty good summary of all of the studies on coaching and also helps you begin to look at evaluation questions for your program. We're going to go ahead and keep moving, but I think what I'm seeing from your responses and what you have there is that you are looking at how the solid coaching program does give you those pieces of research and how you can use them to move forward. Also, there are many kind of connections to Common Core-based standards, and as you look at moving toward the future, I know our Canadian friends aren't doing Common Core-based standards, but everyone else probably on the line is today. So thank you for just those responses to Chapter 1. We're going to move on to the characteristics now. Okay, so those of you who had an opportunity to look at Chapter 1 and 2 will see that we believe there are a set of distinct characteristics that distinguish or differentiate effective coaching programs from ineffective coaching programs. And so we really believe that an effective principal-coach relationship is the key to an effective coaching program. And there are some characteristics that we're going to introduce to you today, and then next week Heather and Joellen will go more in depth around this principal-coach relationship with you. So we believe that it's important to distinguish and to assert that the principal is the instructional leader and that the coach's role is to support the principal in that role of instructional leadership. So in doing that, it's really important for them to get on the same page. They need to talk about their beliefs, about instruction. They need to have a common vision, and they need to share that vision with the staff. It's also important for the staff to understand that the coach is not an evaluator. That's the principal's role. And so since the coach's relationship with the teachers that they're working with is based on trust, it's really important for teachers to feel that the work that they do with the coach is confidential. So working that out with the principal through a partnership agreement, and again with teachers in those partnership agreements, and sharing with the whole school that the work is going to be confidential, and getting clear on what will be shared with the principal is important to consider. It's also important that teachers and principals set up a specific time and a way that they intend to communicate with each other. And we find that the more frequent the communication, the more effective the program. So if possible, that daily communication is really recommended. If a coach is school-based, we really recommend a minimum of once a week for the communication. We also believe that the principal can provide support for coaching. They can do that by providing feedback on an ongoing basis so that coaches can adjust their work as needed based on that feedback. The principal can also support the coach by providing the time and the resources to make coaching effective. So things like providing substitute teachers so that coaches can meet with teachers, providing the time for them to get together, providing a space for the coaches to plan and to meet with teachers and do their work. All of that is important in terms of the characteristics that build those strong principal-coach relationships. Next week, when Heather and Joe talk a little bit more about this, we'll also talk about the definitions of confidentiality, which we see are absolutely essential. There are some definitions in Chapter 2 that you might want to look at, but we believe there needs to be a written definition as well as just a kind of common understanding of what it is. A couple things we think are important in the principal and in the coach-teacher relationship, and then we'll give you a chance to kind of process with us about that. One of the first things we see is absolutely essential is that teachers and coaches talk about what's their responsibilities to each other as they work together. We call that partnership agreements. We believe they need to be in place for principals and coaches and teachers and coaches. And we'll walk through the characteristics of what that is next week, but we think that you need to talk with one another before you start your work together so everybody kind of knows what their role is in this relationship. We also believe it's a reciprocal relationship. We believe each person contributes to it, that the coach learns as much from the teacher as the teacher learns from the coach. And often we talk with coaches about how important it is to never give teachers the idea that you think you are smarter or better than the teachers, that you are a learner alongside of them. You might have some information, you probably have some expertise they may not have, but it is a reciprocal relationship that we're both learning from each other. We have found that to be one of the most important things in terms of making a relationship successful. We also believe there's times you need to communicate, and how will you communicate is another conversation you need to have with coach-teacher. Will you be communicating in writing? Will you communicate to each other on a regular basis, meeting together? Depends on whether you do coaching cycles or whether you just are going to do one kind of coaching interaction with another person. But we really think it's important that you communicate your work to the entire staff as well. We think it's important that everyone on the staff know what it is that you are doing with your time. We sometimes get a little upset with other people that we believe coaches need to be accountable for the whole staff, but I think that anyone who doesn't have kids on a regular basis is often looked upon by other teachers as someone who doesn't have as much responsibility as we have. So I think that's an important piece. And the last one on this one is we believe coach's job is to build other teachers' capacity. I think many of you have read Taking the Lead, which was the first book by Joellen and I, and we talked a lot about the roles of coaches. And we think many of those roles, such as data coach, really end up being roles that teacher leaders can take. And the sign of a good coach is that you've built lots of teacher leadership at your site, and other people can do the work you have been doing. And so I think that's so important that coach not be looked upon as the only teacher leader in the organization, that you have to have lots of teacher leaders. The coach can't do it all. So I think that's real important. And in that chapter, we also have examples of each of these things. We want to get some response from you because Chris and I have been kind of talking at you here for a while. So think about what characteristics of these relationships, the two we just talked through, which was coach-teacher and coach-principal, which ones are in place in your setting, and what areas really need some work? So if you'd respond in the chat box, that'd be great.
So Kathy, I see that when you have more than one principal, meeting can sometimes be a challenge, and that's true. So setting up just an agreement with the principal about how they want to be communicated with when you're in their building. Sometimes principals say, please leave me a note every time you're in my building, just kind of summarizing the work that you did today. Sometimes it's an email. Sometimes it's a phone call, but making sure that you find time to have some type of communication on an ongoing basis is really important.
I'd like to respond to a couple things. The first one is when you talk about enrolling teachers, it's often a challenge. One of the things we have found is that it's very, very important for a teacher for a principal to set a very clear expectation that all teachers or many teachers work with the coach on a regular basis. And the best, I think, example of this I heard was the principal who basically said, there's an expectation that every teacher in this building is a learner. And being a learner, I expect you all to be working with people who help you learn. The coach is one of those people. So I would think it's really important that all of you use your learning skills and access people such as the coach. And if you want to use someone else than the designated coach, fine, but the expectation that you actually use somebody to help you with your learning is important. Robert, let me just respond to the, your comment about do they see coaches as an arm of the principal. I think the coaches walk a very fine line. They have to be the one who really is there for teachers, and they really have the teacher perspective, and they continue to have the teacher perspective, so they bring an eye for principals as well. What's really important is your confidentiality agreement. If you live by it, it is written, everybody knows what it is. They don't think you're telling things that you said you wouldn't tell, then that trust will develop, and then the teacher can really serve as the person who's doing that. You want to answer, Carla? Carla, you had a question about discussing coaches' roles and responsibilities. We do suggest that somewhere near the beginning of the year, as you enroll teachers, so you wouldn't do everyone all at once with a partnership agreement, but you would have conversations before you actually start the work with them.
I would add that a lot of times, especially if you're going to be doing co-teaching or that kind of thing, that each time you're doing a coaching cycle, you might revisit that partnership agreement and update it or change it to meet the needs of that particular coaching cycle that you're in.
One of the characteristics that we know is really important is that coaches and principals go to training together if at all possible. And in some districts we work with, what they've done is like once every 3 months they invite the principals to come to the coaches training over lunch. And they always come and there's food. So we have them there for a while and we talk through those agreements and we update and how's it going and how well is it working, what do you need to add. You need to keep coming back to this. And even if you just had them, they could Skype with the teachers during the lunch, and you could do something to get that connection. I think that the coaching coordinators really need to be in charge of making sure that there are those coach-principal agreements and that they come back to them on a regular basis. Because what we found is if people don't do that, then what happens is it's not done, and the principal feels uncomfortable sometimes doing that. So we agree with all of you that Trust Matters is a great book as well.
Yes. And that joint training is really important, and I think you'll see that in just a few slides. We're going to talk a little bit about how important that is.
So I think we're going to move on to the next categories unless people have more questions or comments that you want us to answer in relationship to this. We would end with just saying as much as you can get your principals and coaches in the same room, the better off you are. The other thing we do on a regular basis is whoever, and we'll talk about the coaching champion in a sec, but whoever the coaching champion is, meets with principals and coaches at individual buildings on a regular basis to check in with them both, to see how it's going, to check in with those agreements. So I think that's an important piece as well. Okay, so if you look at the next slide that's up there, this is what we believe is kind of the next area that we see as real important. It's really important that you have clear roles and responsibilities for coaches. One of the things that we have given you in your tools for Chapter 2 is the roles for coaches, coach leaders, and for coaches. We think you cannot take on all 9 roles. You have to take on the roles that make sense for you at this point in time. And they may change for you every couple of years. They may change for you on an annual basis, although we would tell you we think it needs to be a longer period of time. For those of you who don't know what the roles are, they were defined in the first book, Taking the Lead. And Chris and I will put up a list on the forum tonight of those 10 roles if you don't know what they are. But we believe it's important as you start a program to say, here are the roles of our teachers, of our coaches, sorry. They're going to be working in the area of catalyst for change, or this year they're really working on data coach. We see data coach as one of those roles that often falls off. You've got to get good at it first so people learn how to do it. Your other teacher leaders, they take it over. But you need to be very clear on what roles they are and what responsibilities go with those roles. Because then the coaches know what they're supposed to do and the teachers know what they're supposed to do, which is kind of a nice thing all together. We believe that school improvement plan and coach work needs to align really well. That if your coaches are doing work that does not align with your school improvement plan, that you need to think about ways you can have that align. That it is focused on quality teaching in all classrooms. So we believe coaches work with special ed teachers, regular ed teachers, PE teachers, whoever is willing, able, expected to work with the coach. We also believe that coaches shouldn't be doing all of the data work. It should be side-by-side work that coaches and teachers are doing together. It is about members, about building capacity. So it's important that everybody know what the role of the coach is. The coach has a focus, so they don't get pulled in a million different ways, and that the majority of their work is spent on classroom work. So that can be planning before the classroom work. It can be actually in the classroom co-teaching. It can be observing, demonstration teaching, but it really needs to be around the work in the classroom. Sometimes we see coaches taking on a lot of administrative work. So they're doing all the data analysis instead of actually working with the teachers and doing it together. They do the work of putting together groups of kids for the teachers, or they do the assessment work, so they assess individual kids. We believe that really needs to be joint work, because when coaches do all that work, they do all the learning around that work, but they're not actually perceived, nor are they actually interacting on classroom work. So those are just kind of a couple more things we see as really important.
All right, so we would like to hear from you a little bit about your thinking about these roles and responsibilities. What parts align with your thinking? What questions do you have? I've noticed a couple things in the chat box. One was a question about, do you differentiate the roles for the teachers that you're working with? And the role should be aligned to the job description, and the role should be aligned to the school improvement goals, you know, the focus of the school. And of course, each teacher that you work with, you're going to differentiate your coaching based on, you know, level of experience, what their needs are, what they're focusing on. I also saw somebody said that they had focused on all 10 roles, and we really recommend, you know, 2 to 3 roles at any one time, that you get really clear and focused on what your vision is and what you're hoping to accomplish through your goals, and then match the roles that way. So we'll take a few minutes to listen here as we read what you have in the chat box, and then we'll do some more responding.
Kathy, I think you're right. I think a lot of times there's coaching actually going on before you've defined it, but you need to be clear when you actually roll out the program. And we believe there should be a formal rollout of the program about which roles are the coaches going to do. If you try to have them do all 10, they will do none of them well. And then what will happen is people will feel like it's just a scattered thing. It's just one more person who's a quasi-administrator, and won't feel like it really makes them more effective as a teacher.
So as I'm looking at some of your responses, I'm reminded of something that we use that is really effective with coaches, is to have coaches take those 10 roles, make a pie chart, and say, and then what percentage of your time are you spending in each of those roles, and how would you like to be spending your time? You know, what's your ideal based on the vision that you have for coaching, or your charge for coaching. So that's one way to think about getting closer to using your time more effectively.
So as people are moving into Common Core and new teacher evaluation systems, in many of the districts we're working with, the coaches are being framed as the people who are there to make teachers successful with these 2 new initiatives. And so by framing it that way, they have picked the roles of instructional specialists, catalyst for change, data person, and one more in most of them. and maybe it's also curriculum specialist. But it's important that you're clear about what actually do they do in each of those roles, because you could think a data role is a different role than I think it is. So it's important that you do some comparison and that you look at really defining it. And as Chris said, the pie chart, or I've had principals and coaches sit down and say, okay, what did we say we were going to do? What are we doing? And so are we on the right track with what we're doing, or do we need to shift it back? And we would tell you need to do that about every 3 months, because it's easy to get so far down the road that you don't know where you're going. The other thing we would tell you is we think your coaches need to be doing logs. They need to have, you need to know what they're spending their time doing. They need to have that so they really do know how they're spending their time. It's not just like, oh, I felt like I was spending my time doing this. You need to be able to look at that on a regular basis and decide, are you going to shift the district focus of the role, the school focus of the role, or are you going to stay where you are? More comments on being clear on the roles. In the tools, we have, I think, 2 or 3 districts examples of how they've defined the roles, because that's been a helpful piece.
Okay. So the last set of characteristics that we're going to look at includes the support that we provide for coaches. So support, supervision, evaluation of coaches should collaboratively be done by principals, central office personnel when appropriate. There needs to be clear standards for the evaluation, and keep in mind that effective programs should align the success of the coaching program with student learning. And so having that very clearly defined is an important piece of the thinking about evaluation. As we said earlier, evaluation will be talked about in one of our later sessions. So hiring and placement is another consideration. And when we think about hiring and placement, it should be based on a clear job description, and it should be done collaboratively between the district and the site, and it should be based on the district's goals or the school's goals. It needs to be tied to that data. There needs to be adequate time and resources for coaches to continue their own professional learning. When coaches are just moving into this position, they really need to have weekly opportunities to get together and learn and reflect on what they're practicing and what they need to be learning. And later, we would say a minimum of once a month, they need to get together for ongoing professional learning. There needs to be a coach champion. Some of you in our e-learning community are in this role of coach champion. You may not call it that, but a coach champion is someone from the district that supports the coaching program. And they visit the coaches and they visit the principals to make sure that the program is focused, and that if there are things that need to be addressed, they get addressed early. But they really provide that support and that coherence between the district and the school. There needs to be an opportunity for coaches to receive feedback about their work so that they can make adjustments or changes as needed in order to be more impactful with the work that they do. And that feedback should be a combination of teacher feedback, principal feedback, and district feedback. And it should be on a frequent, kind of formative, ongoing basis so that the changes can be made. There needs to be a process for addressing conflict when it arises. And there is a tool in Chapter 8, I think it's Tool 8.4, which is an example of a conflict resolution process. And so this just gives us a way to think about, if there is a conflict between a teacher and a coach, what is the most positive way to interact to resolve the conflict? If there is a conflict between the principal and the coach, or a central office person or the coach champion, how do those conflicts get resolved? So something to think about proactively is helpful.
So let me answer a couple of your questions in the chat. First of all, you're kind of having an ongoing conversation about logs. When we first started the coaching program in the district we worked in, it took us 5, 6 revisions of the log before we got it to a place where we actually even liked the information it gave us. And so I think here's the categories that I would put on the log that I think make sense. I would say you look for big hunks of time. You can go anywhere 15, 30 minutes, whatever, depending on whether the 15 minutes is significant. We would say you need to keep a log. That's the amount of time you spent. Who was involved? So was it all the 5th grade teachers? Was it just one teacher? You know, and so this is not a log that you necessarily write names. You could just say 5 middle school teachers or 7th grade language arts teachers. What was the work? Did you actually plan together? Did you co-teach together? Did you look at student work together? But you want to have some sense of what kind of work are you doing. Did you do a coaching lab, whatever. Some logs have things like content area because you want to know how much time they're spending in literacy or math or the content area of the people that you're working with. Another addition many logs have is they have the next step. And that next step is really for them because then it helps them remember next time they work with that teacher. So sometimes we have coaches who have like a folder for each grade level and or each teacher, and they just stick those in there. We have found that coaches tell us that if they do it on a daily basis, it's much easier than doing it on a weekly basis. It takes them about 5 to 10 minutes a day, and if they wait till Friday, it takes them hours. They can't remember what they did. Some of the log formats they use, because I'm watching our conversation here, are done by companies. You buy them, but a lot of people just set them up themselves. I would tell you it's a lot easier to do online, and if you have a lot of coaches, having them report this electronically to the district coach champion is really important because you need to be able to report out as where a coach is spending their time at the district level. So I think though that's important. We have some people who still want to do it on paper, but we've really been pushing that they do it electronically. So we think it's important you have something. If you want examples, there are some examples in the book, but if you want more, just email us and we'll try to get you some more. The coach champion, by the way, one of you asked, is never the principal. It is somebody who is not evaluating that coach usually. It's somebody who's kind of coordinating the program. They're the ones who kind of say, oh, the coaches could be involved in that. Or they also protect coaches' time because many times in districts they say, oh, the coach could do that. Oh, the coach could do that. So we try to kind of keep some things away from it being the coach could do that.
Yeah. We worked with a district where the coach champion was also the evaluator, and they were from central office. And what we heard from coaches was that they didn't quite trust their coach champion because they were also evaluating them. They didn't feel like they could be vulnerable as they would with a coach champion who was not also their evaluator. So that's just a consideration. Hey, there have also been a few questions about feedback. So ways to get some feedback from teachers and from principals or central office. One way would be through surveys. Another would be pulling together some focus groups, a focus group of teachers, a focus group of principals, a focus group even of coaches, and asking them specific questions that you would want to know about the program and the impact that the coaching program is having, as well as the impact that the coaching or the person is having on changing instruction in the school.
I'm responding to Megan about her whiteboard. I think it's a great idea, as long as the teachers feel like it's okay for everybody else to know who the coach is working with. You know, it's really dependent on the culture at your school. We encourage people to share what they're learning, what they're doing. We would encourage people to stand up in front of the whole staff and do testimonials to what they're working on with the coach. But in some buildings, it is, you really have to move it away from the deficit model, that some teachers think it means that I'm not good enough if I ask for coach help. So that's kind of a bigger piece of it. We do want some more responses from you about what do you see as some of your challenges as you try to provide the level of support we're talking about? What have been some of your challenges? Having enough time in the day, absolutely. Great ideas are still coming up with the login stuff.
You know, Dana, the clarifying our purpose and clear expectations, that is such a critical piece to pay attention to. So thank you for offering that.
Also, Lynn, you're talking about working with teachers who are not reflective. I think that it's up to us as coaches to set the structure so we do push the reflective process. I think the more we coach from the student's work, from the outcomes you're getting in your classroom versus a set of instructional strategies that we're going to checklist you on, I think the more we'll get reflection.
I love what Robert just put, trying to create a mindset in our school that coaching is part of the improvement process that people can use to become more effective in their role. It's an asset. It's not an asset lens looking at coaching versus a deficit. There's something wrong with you and I'm here to fix you. It's really, we're all in this together. We're trying to become the best we can be, the growth mindset. Thank you. Also, finding time. I noticed a lot of comments about finding time. Again, that all the more reason to focus, to get clear about your expectations, to stand with the principal in front of the staff and share what the role of the coach is, to make sure that teachers understand that a coach is not another administrator. They're not there to discipline students or to take lunch duty or to do managerial kinds of tasks or run papers, that kind of thing. And also that the coach cannot be spread too thin with the 10 roles. What are the 2 or 3 roles that we're really focusing on right now? Which teachers am I working with? Which groups of teachers am I working with? So getting very clear in your conversations with the principal.
Nice comment, Lori. It's really true. It's that everybody has an obligation, an expectation to be a learner, and accessing the coach is part of our learning. And it is a gift to teachers. Many times when the principal has the expectation that everyone is a learner, and that the expectations, you'll show me how you've learned, it's a different environment than you're bad, go get the coach. Or you didn't do this and go get the coach. So I think that's the key of what you want to do. And I see many of you talking about the growth mindset and Carol Dweck's work. Many coaches are reading the book together and then talking about how do we create that mindset with our teachers. But I again have to say, with Common Core coming and teacher evaluation, I'm watching districts with teachers having more need for coaches and seeing them as their kind of lifeline to being successful with this. So I think that's important, that they see that, they see coaching as a way to make them successful with teacher evaluation and a way to make them successful with moving to Common Core. I just think it's a different frame. I like Sheila's talking about a sports metaphor. Do you have one, Sheila?
The better you get it, the more coaching you receive.
And Carl, I think you're right. The more you can focus it on student work, the better off you are. what happens for kids. If you have not read Student-Centered Coaching by Diane Sweeney, it's a great book on student-centered coaching and getting the frame to start the coaching and end the coaching with the student work. So just another piece you may want to think about.
And a thought that I'd like to share is teachers don't want to be fixed. Teachers want to be understood. They want to be supported. So when we, even in our coaching conversations, instead of saying, how can I help you, how can I support you, changes the conversation from the deficit to the more growth-oriented way of looking at it.
So we want to move you to the recommendations. In each of the chapters, there is a set of recommendations at the end of the chapter. And at the end of the chapter, the recommendations are in 3 categories: central office, building administrators, and coaches. And what we've done on this slide is we've just highlighted a couple of those in terms of what's there. But what we've tried to do in the book is that we've written the chapter, and then there's a scenario, and then we have actually put a set of recommendations.
Okay, so these recommendations are from the end of Chapter 2. So we just have highlighted one for each one so that you can see what they look like. But what we would really like is for you to think about, as you extend your learning this week, if you would consider your role and then look at the recommendations that match your role and kind of use those to help you reflect on what we've talked about today. So one of the recommendations for central office is to research effective coaching programs if your coaching program is not in place yet and modeled prior to or in the early stages of development, or if you're going back and revising your program to, again, look at what do we know about effective coaching programs and models, and how do we want to tweak our program to bring it more into alignment with what we know are effective practices for coaching. And if you're a building administrator, how do you communicate clearly and positively to the staff about the program, and how do you provide your support for the program so that the teachers in the building understand that coaching is an expectation in the building. And then if you're a coach, be thinking about how you monitor, how your time is spent, and adjusting that time and the allocation based on your roles, based on your job description, making sure that your work is focused and that you are having the most impact you can on student learning.
So we're seeing some conversation here about do people have surveys or questions they've asked of people to get some feedback for coaches? Yes, there are some of those in the book. And we would tell you that we believe the user of coaches, which is mostly teachers, really need an opportunity to give feedback to the coach about what's working for them and what's not working for them. And so sometimes just those 2 generic questions are helpful in terms of what you're looking at. So as we begin to wrap up for today, we want to talk a little bit about looking back. People have posted their introductions in the community forum. We think if you want to know more about people, that's a good place to go and to read who people are. We'd also like you to post your reflections on what we've posed today. What are you thinking now as you look back on the set of characteristics that we talked you through? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Do you have some tools that you can share with others in relationship to them? But kind of what are you thinking in terms of what we talked about today?
And then looking forward, as you prepare for next week, we'd like you to read chapters 9 and 10, and then consider this question as you're preparing. So based on your experience, what do you think are the defining characteristics of a strong relationship among coaches, teachers, and principals.
And before we sign off, we want to make sure that you have about 2 minutes, I think, before we're going to let Tom do a quick wrap-up here about a couple other logistical things. Any questions you want or you have for Chris or I and want us to address at this time?
If the shoe fits, Joe.
I'm sorry? Somebody has their phone on, and we're hearing everything you're talking about in the group.
I'm going to address Michelle. Would you recommend that coaches specialize in one academic area or be more of a generalist? And I think that depends on what your focus is and what your data says. Some coaches are content coaches, and some coaches are generalist coaches. Our kind of frame is around instructional coaching. We find that most coaches that start out as content coaches end up being more generalist coaches because you're coaching instructional practice, you're coaching pedagogy as well as content and building those strong relationships.
The only thing we'd say to you is at the high school level, it has been very hard to get successful coaching programs where the coaches are not content-based.
Yes.
High school teachers are just not often willing to give others who aren't content experts any kind of deference to they might know something that could help them other than their content area. So we've often worked with districts when you have a different format for different levels in terms of the coaching piece.
And with that, I would say with Common Core standards, thinking about rigorous instruction, feedback, complexity of thinking, goal setting, all of those kind of things are more the role of a generalist.
Dana, with technology coaches, we have not seen that be as true in terms of content versus not content. But if tech coaches are only technology, we think they need to embed their work in instruction. Those that come, technology coaches that come from instruction do more effective work in our minds and what we've seen than people who come in as just technology coaches.
And I think one of the shifts that I see when I work with technology coaches is that it's kind of a mind shift for them to shift from being the consultant to being the coach, to really building capacity or capability in others. Because they're used to being the expert and being asked to be the expert. So that's one shift that they sometimes struggle with.
So Tom, we want to turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. And we have one more minute. I'm just going to give a couple of really brief announcements. And first off, thank you to Cindy and to Chris for this hour. This was a great start. And thank you to all of you for participating throughout our hour. This was a really fun session, so thanks. I'm going to be really brief. If you don't have your book by Friday, shoot me an email and we'll figure out what's going on. Everybody who's in this room should have your book by Friday. Frankly, you should have it before Friday, but if for some reason Friday comes and you don't have it, just shoot me an email and let me know. We talked about a lot of different resources and a lot of different things that we were hoping to be able to post in the community. This week I'm going to go back through all this chat and I will post everything that we talked about during this hour, and I'll make sure we have access to the community. I do have a recording of Carol Dweck speaking at our summer conference. from Denver this past year. It is an enormous file. I'm not sure if I can post it in the community. I'll try to do that. If I can't do that, I'll break it up into little pieces if I can, and I'll post it in there. One way or the other, I'll get that Carol Dweck piece posted in the community. Let's see, what else do I have? There's information. A couple of people have emailed asking about the CEU credit for the program. If you have any questions about that, it's probably a good chance that someone else might have a question too. So post it in the discussion forum that I set up for the CEUs, and I'll address it in there. That, I believe, is all I got. Everybody, I'm going to shoot an email out to everyone later today that has a link to the recording of the session, and we'll have another couple of announcements for our steps for the rest of the week. And I'll do that today, but from now on, after each session, everything we do, we're going to do in the community. And I won't be emailing a lot of stuff out. The recorded session will be available for the foreseeable future, Megan, to answer your question. It is not going to go anywhere. You'll be able to access it long past when this program ends. So we'll just keep everything in our community will just keep active for the foreseeable future. There's no real reason to close the community down. Okay, it is 1 past the top of the hour. Again, thank you to Cindy and to Chris, and thank you all. This is a great start, and be on the lookout for an email from me later today, and have a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you through the community the rest of this week. So thanks a lot. Bye.